The sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Willow Creek, Colorado, as Beatrice Turner fought desperately against the iron grip of the masked bandit who had seized her purse. It was 1878, and she had traveled too far and sacrificed too much to surrender her life savings to a common thief. With a fierce determination that belied her slender frame, she landed a solid kick to the man's shin, causing him to howl in pain. "Let go, you varmint!" Beatrice shouted, her golden brown hair escaping its carefully pinned arrangement as she struggled. The few townsfolk on the street scattered for cover, not wanting to get caught in the crossfire should weapons be drawn. The bandit, a scraggly man with rotting teeth and whiskey on his breath, pulled harder. "Give it up, lady, or you'll be sorry," Beatrice responded by sinking her teeth into his wrist. The bandit yowled, releasing his grip just enough for her to wrench her purse away. She stumbled backward, clutching her belongings to her chest, her heart pounding like a steam engine. "That's my kind of woman," a deep voice drawled from behind her. Beatrice whirled around to find herself looking up at the imposing figure of a man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion. The afternoon sun silhouetted him dramatically, casting his face in shadow beneath the wide brim of his Stetson. What she could see was a strong jawline covered with stubble and piercing eyes that assessed the situation quickly. The bandit, realizing he now had more trouble than a feisty woman to contend with, began backing away. "This ain't your business, mister." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. "A lady being accosted in broad daylight is every decent man's business." His hand hovered near the holster at his hip. "I suggest you find your way out of town before the sheriff gets wind of this." The bandit spat on the ground but seemed to think better of challenging the tall stranger. With a final glare at Beatrice, he scurried away, disappearing down an alley. "Are you all right, madam?" the cowboy asked, turning his attention to Beatrice. She straightened her posture, trying to regain her composure. "I am, thank you, though I had the situation well in hand." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "So I saw. Quite the fighter you are." "Beatrice Turner," she said, extending her hand in a formal greeting. "I've just arrived on the afternoon stage." "Vincent Morgan," he replied, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair. He took her hand, and Beatrice was surprised by the gentleness of his touch despite his calloused palm. "Welcome to Willow Creek. Not the friendliest of greetings, I'm afraid." Beatrice attempted to smooth her disheveled hair. "I've faced worse. I'm looking for the Willow Creek Hotel. I'm to start as their new schoolteacher tomorrow." Vincent's eyebrows rose. "The schoolteacher? Well, the children of this town are in for quite an education if your handling of that miscreant is any indication." "I assure you, Mr. Morgan, my teaching methods are considerably more refined," she replied with a hint of indignation, though she couldn't suppress a small smile. He chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to settle comfortably in the air between them. "I meant no offense, Miss Turner. Allow me to escort you to the hotel. Willow Creek can be a rough place for newcomers, especially ones as what, Mr. Morgan?" she prompted when he hesitated. "As determined as yourself," he finished, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Vincent collected his horse's reins and offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice accepted it, the unexpected gallantry catching her off guard. "What brings a woman like you to a frontier town like this?" he asked as they began walking down the main street. "A teaching position," she answered simply. "And a fresh start." Vincent nodded, not pressing further. "Well, you've certainly made an impression on your first day." As they walked, Beatrice felt the curious stares of townsfolk following them. She realized what a sight they must make her with her rumpled traveling dress and him, tall and imposing in his trail-worn clothes, yet with an unmistakable air of competence and danger. The Willow Creek Hotel came into view, a two-story wooden structure that was one of the more imposing buildings in town. Vincent helped Beatrice up the steps, releasing her arm only when they reached the entrance. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Morgan," Beatrice said formally. Vincent replaced his hat with a slight bow. "My pleasure, Miss Turner. I hope our paths cross again under more favorable circumstances." As he turned to leave, Beatrice called after him, "Mr. Morgan." He looked back over his shoulder. "I meant what I said. I did have the situation under control." A slow grin spread across his face. "I don't doubt it for a second, Miss Turner. That's precisely what caught my attention." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Beatrice to wonder about the mysterious cowboy who had admired her fighting spirit rather than chastised it. The hotel proprietor, Mrs. Guthrie, was a stout woman with a no-nonsense attitude. She showed Beatrice to a modest but clean room on the second floor. "School board's been waiting on a new teacher since Miss Jenkins ran off with that traveling salesman, Mrs. Guthrie explained as she handed over the key. "Hope you've got more sense than that girl did." "I assure you my focus is entirely on education," Beatrice replied firmly. Mrs. Guthrie nodded approvingly. "Good to hear. Supper's at 6 if you're wanting to join the other boarders." Left alone, Beatrice unpacked her meager belongings, carefully arranging her few books on the small writing desk. She removed a framed photograph of her parents and placed it on the bedside table, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. They would never see her accomplish her dream of becoming a respected teacher, having both succumbed to influenza 3 years prior. At 22, Beatrice had learned that life rarely followed a predictable path. After losing her family home to debts, she had worked as a governess in Boston, saving every penny until she could afford proper teacher training. Willow Creek represented not just employment, but independence, a chance to build something of her own. The distant memory of Vincent Morgan's eyes lingered in her mind as she changed for supper. She dismissed the thought quickly. Men like him, wild and untamed as the frontier itself, were not part of her carefully constructed plans. The following morning, Beatrice arrived at the schoolhouse early, eager to prepare for her first day of teaching. The one-room building sat at the edge of town, freshly whitewashed but showing signs of neglect. Inside, rows of rough-hewn desks faced a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. She was arranging her materials when the door opened, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. "Mr. Morgan," she said, surprised. Vincent stepped inside, hat in hand. "Miss Turner, I hoped I might find you here. Is there something I can help you with?" she asked, suddenly conscious of her appearance in her severe black teaching dress. "I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right after yesterday's excitement," he said, his eyes scanning the classroom, "and to warn you about Billy Jenkins." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "One of my students." "The ringleader," Vincent confirmed with a wry smile. "He's run off the last 2 teachers with his antics. Son of the town's blacksmith, good man, but too busy to keep the boy in line since his wife passed." "Thank you for the warning, but I'm quite capable of handling difficult children," she assured him. Vincent studied her face. "I don't doubt it. Just thought you should be prepared." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the first students, who stopped short at the sight of Vincent. "Mr. Morgan," a freckle-faced boy exclaimed, "did you bring your gun? Can we see it?" "Now, Tommy, is that any way to greet your new teacher?" Vincent admonished gently, gesturing toward Beatrice. The children, 8 in total, ranging from 6 to 13 years old, regarded her with undisguised curiosity. The oldest boy, a sturdy youth with challenging eyes, must be Billy Jenkins, Beatrice surmised. "Good morning, children," she said with authority. "I'm Miss Turner, your new teacher." "She won't last a week," Billy muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Vincent cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to get acquainted, Miss Turner. Children, mind your manners." He nodded to Beatrice. "Good luck." As he left, Beatrice wondered briefly about his interest in the school, but pushed the thought aside to focus on the task at hand. She would need all her wits to establish control over this classroom. The day proved challenging, with Billy leading several attempts to undermine her authority. By dismissal time, Beatrice was exhausted but satisfied that she had maintained order without resorting to the harsh discipline some frontier teachers employed. She was erasing the blackboard when a soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting a parent. Vincent entered, this time carrying a small basket. "I thought you might appreciate some sustenance after your first day in the trenches." Beatrice couldn't help but smile. "That's very thoughtful, Mr. Morgan." She accepted the basket, which contained fresh bread, cheese, and apples. "May I ask why you've taken such an interest in my welfare?" Vincent leaned against a desk. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in education." "Are you on the school board?" she asked, puzzled. "No," he admitted, "but I donate books to the school when I can." "Not much use for them out at my ranch." "You're a rancher." Somehow she had imagined him as more of a drifter. "The Morgan spread about 5 miles west of town," he confirmed. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine." Beatrice was intrigued despite herself. "And you read enough to donate books regularly?" A shadow crossed his face. "Reading wasn't always easy for me. Had a teacher once who made all the difference. Figured I owed it to the next generation." There was something in his tone that suggested deeper waters than she had initially perceived. "That's very admirable, Mr. Morgan." "Vincent," he corrected gently. "After saving your purse from a bandit, I think we can dispense with formalities when it's just us." Beatrice hesitated. As the town's schoolteacher, she needed to maintain a certain propriety, yet there was something about Vincent that made her want to know more. "Very well, Vincent," she conceded, "but only in private." His smile warmed her more than it should have. "How was young Billy today?" "Challenging," she admitted, "but not insurmountable. If anyone can handle him, it's the woman who fought off a bandit for her purse," Vincent said with obvious admiration. Beatrice laughed. "I suspect taming Billy Jenkins will require more subtlety than brute force." "I've found most worthwhile things do," Vincent replied, his gaze holding hers a moment longer than necessary. An uncomfortable awareness flickered between them, and Beatrice busied herself gathering her papers. "I should return to the hotel before supper." Vincent straightened. "May I walk you back?" Common sense told her to decline, to maintain distance from this man who stirred unfamiliar feelings. But something else, something that had pushed her to leave Boston and journey west, made her nod in agreement. As they walked through town, several people greeted Vincent with respect, tipping hats or nodding acknowledgments. Clearly, he was well regarded in Willow Creek. "So, Miss Turner," he said as they strolled, "what made you choose teaching as your profession?" "My father was a professor at a small college in Massachusetts," she explained. "He believed education was the key to improving one's circumstances. When I lost my parents, teaching seemed the natural choice." "I'm sorry about your parents," Vincent said quietly. "I lost mine young as well." "Is that when you came west?" she asked. He nodded. 16 and full of foolish dreams. Worked as a cowhand until I could save enough for my own place." "That's impressive," Beatrice said sincerely, "building something from nothing." "Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it," he admitted. "A man gets lonely out here." The vulnerability in his admission touched her. "Is that why you come to town so often?" "I have business in town," he said, then added with a smile, but I find myself with more reasons to visit lately." They reached the hotel too quickly for Beatrice's liking. At the entrance, Vincent removed his hat. "Thank you for the basket," she said, "and the company." "My pleasure." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider joining me for dinner at the cafe tomorrow evening as a proper welcome to Willow Creek?" Propriety dictated she refuse. A schoolteacher dining alone with a bachelor would certainly cause talk, yet the thought of declining made her heart sink. "I would like that," she heard herself say, "but perhaps we could make it Saturday instead. I have lesson preparations tomorrow." Vincent's face brightened. "Saturday it is. I'll collect you at 6. As she watched him walk away, Beatrice knew she was entering dangerous territory. Vincent Morgan was exactly the kind of distraction she had vowed to avoid. Yet somehow, that resolution seemed less important with each encounter. The next few days passed in a blur of teaching challenges and settling into her new role. Billy Jenkins continued to test her patience, but she was making progress with the other students. On Friday afternoon, she kept Billy after class. "You have a quick mind," she told him bluntly. "You could be an exceptional student if you applied yourself." Billy scuffed his boot against the floor. "What's the point? I'm going to be a blacksmith like my pa." "And would your mother have wanted that for you?" "Only that?" she asked gently. The boy's head snapped up. "How'd you know about my ma?" "Mr. Morgan mentioned she had passed," Beatrice said. "I'm sorry for your loss." Billy's defiance faltered. "She used to read to me before she got sick." "Would you like to borrow a book?" Beatrice offered. "One you could read yourself." After a moment's hesitation, Billy nodded. She selected a volume of adventure stories, one engaging enough to capture a young boy's imagination. "This doesn't mean I'm going to stop giving you trouble," he warned as he accepted the book. Beatrice smiled. "I would expect nothing less, Billy. But perhaps we can find more constructive outlets for your creativity." Saturday evening arrived with a flutter of anticipation Beatrice hadn't felt in years. She dressed with care, selecting her best dress, a deep blue garment that complemented her eyes. She had just finished pinning her hair when a knock came at her door. Mrs. Guthrie stood outside, her expression disapproving. "Mr. Morgan is waiting for you downstairs. I hope you know what you're doing, Miss Turner. Tongues will wag." "Mr. Morgan and I are merely colleagues with a shared interest in education," Beatrice replied smoothly, though her racing pulse betrayed her. Vincent stood when she entered the hotel lobby, and the appreciation in his eyes sent warmth spreading through her chest. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The cafe was small but clean, with checkered tablecloths and kerosene lamps providing a warm glow. Several patrons glanced their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. "I hope I haven't compromised your position," Vincent said after they ordered. "Small towns thrive on gossip." "I've never been one to let others dictate my actions," Beatrice replied, "though I admit I'm curious about your interest in me." Vincent considered her for a moment. "From the instant I saw you fighting that bandit, I knew you were different. Most women would have surrendered their possessions or waited for a man to rescue them. You fought back." "I've had to learn to stand on my own," she explained. "As have I," he agreed. "Perhaps that's why I find you so compelling." Their conversation flowed easily through dinner, covering books they had read, places they had seen, and dreams they still harbored. Vincent spoke of expanding his ranch, breeding horses as well as cattle. Beatrice shared her hope of eventually establishing a proper school with multiple classrooms. "You truly care about education," he observed. "Knowledge opens doors that might otherwise remain closed," she said passionately. "Especially for those born without advantages." As they finished their meal, Vincent asked, "Would you care to take a short walk? The evening's pleasant." They strolled along the main street, now quiet as dusk settled over the town. Vincent pointed out buildings and shared stories of Willow Creek's founding after silver was discovered in the nearby mountains. The boom didn't last, he explained, but some of us stayed on, building something more permanent than a mining camp. It takes courage to put down roots in uncertain soil, Beatrice observed. Vincent stopped walking, turning to face her. It does, but sometimes the risk is worth taking. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. For a moment, Beatrice thought he might kiss her, and more surprising was her realization that she wanted him to. Instead, he offered his arm again. I should return you to your lodgings before Mrs. Guthrie sends out a search party. The disappointment she felt was both unexpected and revealing. At the hotel entrance, Vincent held her hand a moment longer than necessary. Might I call on you tomorrow afternoon? I could show you some of the countryside. Proper decorum demanded she decline such an intimate invitation. But Beatrice was thousands of miles from Boston society, and the rules seemed different here in the shadow of the mountains. I would enjoy that, she said. His smile made her decision worthwhile. Until tomorrow, then. Sunday afternoon found them riding along a meandering creek that gave the town its name. Vincent had borrowed a gentle mare for Beatrice, and though it had been years since she'd ridden, she quickly regained her confidence. You ride well, Vincent noted as they cantered across an open meadow. My father insisted I learn, she explained. He believed in practical education for both sons and daughters. They stopped to rest in a grove of cottonwoods, spreading a blanket near the water's edge. Vincent unpacked a simple picnic bread, cold chicken, and early strawberries. It's beautiful here, Beatrice said, taking in the snow-capped mountains in the distance. So different from Massachusetts. This land gets in your blood, Vincent replied. I can't imagine living anywhere else now. As they ate, he told her more about his early years in the West, the hardships, the lessons learned, and the friendship of the local Ute tribe before they were forced onto reservations. The government's treatment of the native peoples has been shameful, he said with genuine regret. They taught me how to survive my first winter here. Beatrice appreciated his candor. Few men would acknowledge such injustices. I try to see the world as it is, not as others tell me it should be, Vincent said. Just as you do. Their eyes met, and Beatrice felt that same crackling awareness she'd experienced before. This time, however, there was no one to observe them, no propriety to maintain. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle yet electric. Beatrice, he said softly, her name a question and an invitation. She leaned forward in answer, and his lips met hers in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened. His arms encircled her, strong and secure, as she yielded to feelings she had long denied herself. When they finally parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you. Even when I was disheveled and fighting a bandit, she teased. Especially then, he assured her. The ride back to town was filled with stolen glances and lingering smiles. Beatrice knew she was falling for Vincent Morgan with alarming speed, but for once in her methodical life, she didn't want to analyze or question her feelings. The next week passed in a whirlwind of teaching during the day and evenings spent with Vincent whenever possible. They shared meals at the cafe, walked along the creek, and talked for hours. With each meeting, Beatrice revealed more of herself, and Vincent did the same. She learned about his struggle with reading as a child, how a patient teacher had finally broken through his frustration and opened the world of books to him. He discovered her passion for women's education, and her dream of someday establishing a school for girls where science and mathematics were taught alongside traditional subjects. On Saturday morning, Vincent invited her to visit his ranch. "I want you to see my home," he said, a vulnerability in his eyes that touched her deeply. The Morgan ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy log house, a large barn, and several corrals where horses grazed. A middle-aged Mexican man was working with a young colt as they arrived. "That's Manuel, my foreman," Vincent explained. "He's been with me since I bought this place." Manuel greeted them warmly, his eyes twinkling with undisguised interest as Vincent introduced Beatrice. "It is about time the patron brought home a lady," he said, ignoring Vincent's warning look. Vincent showed her around the property with obvious pride, pointing out improvements he'd made and plans for expansion. Inside the house, Beatrice was surprised by the well-stocked bookshelf in the main room. "You really do love reading," she observed, running her fingers along the leather-bound spines. "Books have been my companions on many lonely nights," Vincent admitted, "though I find myself less interested in fictional company lately." The house was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and a few touches that spoke of permanence: a hand-woven rug before the fireplace, a clock ticking steadily on the mantel, and framed landscapes on the walls. "It's lovely," Beatrice said sincerely. "A true home." Vincent's expression softened. "It's been just a house for too long. It needs a woman's touch to make it a home." The implication hung in the air between them, both thrilling and terrifying in its possibility. After touring the ranch, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in vivid oranges and pinks. Vincent took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Beatrice," he began hesitantly, "I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've never felt this way about anyone before." Her heart raced at his words. "Nor I," she admitted. "I'm not a wealthy man," he continued, "but I have a good piece of land, strong horses, and a future worth building. I'd like to build it with you." Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "Vincent, are you asking what I think you're asking?" He turned to face her fully. "I'm asking if you could see yourself here with me, as my wife." The word hung in the air between them, momentous and life-changing. "But my teaching," she said, even as her heart leapt at his proposal. "I've worked so hard to establish myself." "The town needs its teacher," Vincent assured her. "I would never ask you to give that up. We'd make it work. You could stay in town during the week if needed, or ride back and forth each day when weather permits." His willingness to accommodate her career touched Beatrice deeply. So many men would have expected her to abandon her profession without a second thought. "There's something else you should know," Vincent added, his expression growing serious. Before you answer, Beatrice tensed. "What is it?" 2 years ago, I was engaged to a woman from Denver, Catherine. She came to visit the ranch and decided frontier life wasn't for her. Said she couldn't bear the isolation, the lack of society." His eyes held a lingering hurt. "I need to know that you understand what you'd be accepting. Life here isn't easy, especially for a woman accustomed to city conveniences." Beatrice considered his words carefully. "I won't pretend there wouldn't be adjustments. But Vincent, I came west seeking not just employment but purpose, a place where I could make a difference and build something meaningful." She squeezed his hand. "I believe I could find both here with you." Hope kindled in his eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she whispered, and his kiss sealed the promise between them. They married 3 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek. The entire town turned out for the celebration, including all of Beatrice's students. Billy Jenkins surprised her by reading a poem he had selected for the occasion, his delivery stumbling but sincere. The school board had agreed that Mrs. Morgan could continue teaching, an unprecedented arrangement that spoke to both Beatrice's value as an educator and Vincent's standing in the community. Their first months of marriage brought the expected adjustments as they learned to blend their independent lives into a shared existence. Beatrice maintained her teaching schedule, riding to town each morning on a mare Vincent had trained specially for her. Some days, when weather or obligations kept her in town overnight, she missed him terribly. But each reunion was sweeter for the separation. By the following spring, they had settled into a rhythm that worked for them both. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, Vincent managing the livestock, while Beatrice kept the books with meticulous care. She had also established a small school garden where she taught her students about plant sciences and cultivation. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Vincent pulled her close against his side. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he posed occasionally, still sometimes insecure about her adjustment to ranch life. Beatrice shook her head. "None." She took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. "Especially now." Vincent's eyes widened. "Beatrice, are you saying?" "Yes," she confirmed, smiling at his stunned expression. "By winter, there will be 3 of us." His whoop of joy startled the horses in the nearby corral. He lifted her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down gently. "Are you happy?" he asked, his hands cradling her face. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "When I fought that bandit for my purse last year, I never dreamed it would lead me here." Vincent laughed. "The moment I saw you fighting him off, I knew you were exactly the kind of woman I needed in my life. Strong, determined, unwilling to surrender what's important to you. And here I thought you were just an interfering cowboy," she teased. "Your interfering cowboy," he corrected, kissing her softly. "Always." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, planning their future and the education of their child, a future that had begun with a chance encounter on a dusty street, where a determined woman had fought for what was hers and captured a cowboy's heart in the process. In the years that followed, Beatrice continued teaching even as their family grew to include 2 sons and a daughter. She eventually established a proper school with multiple classrooms, where girls and boys received equal education in all subjects. Vincent expanded the ranch into one of the most successful in the territory, breeding horses renowned for their intelligence and endurance. But his greatest pride remained the family he and Beatrice had built together, a legacy of love that had begun when she fought a bandit for her purse. And he recognized, in that moment of courage, exactly the kind of woman who could share his life on the frontier.